What's up YouTube, how you doing? This is Mr. Tiebox123 and in this video we're going to be doing a full detailed comparison between this, the HTC One, and this, the Sony Xperia Z. So here we are guys. Now these two phones pretty much at this very moment in time, with the S4 coming out shortly and the S3 now getting a bit tired in comparison to these specifications wise, and also the Note 2 being a slightly different proposition, I would say these two phones are probably the two best phones on the market today in terms of the top high-end smartphones. Now the Sony Xperia Z, obviously from Sony, quite a different beast in fact to the HTC One, even though the end result is actually a very good phone. And regardless of what we discuss in this kind of in-depth detailed comparison, do not forget at any stage these two phones are absolutely fantastic, and really in terms of comparison we're almost splitting hairs between the two. So first up, let's talk about the design. Now both of these have got fantastic build quality, and both in fact are actually designed phenomenally well. But at the same time they actually are very different. The HTC One is a full aluminium chassis right the way round and feels extremely kind of high quality in the hand because of that. Next up we've got the Sony Xperia Z, and that's in fact a completely plastic body all the way round, but still with an extremely nice finish to it. And although it's not metal, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's inferior in terms of build quality. Like I say, they're both extremely high build quality, but just very subtly different. So it really kind of depends which one you prefer. Now in the case of the Xperia Z, it actually has some quite good features because of that plastic case. The first one is the waterproofing and the second one is the dust proofing. Now right the way around the phone we've got all of these different flaps that cover up the extra kind of elements, the external ports and the internal ports to the phone. Things like the headphone jack, the USB socket, the micro SD, the micro SIM card, all those kind of things are all covered by waterproofed flaps with a little bit of rubber that runs all the way around the inside just to seal it. And in fact Sony say this is capable of substantiating 30 minutes underwater at a depth of about 3 feet. So fairly decent there, and those people that are quite privy to dropping their phone in water or down the toilet or something like that, that's a really nice feature to have on a phone. For me personally, it'd be nice if all these manufacturers started introducing that nanotechnology that enables the entire phone and the internals to be waterproofed without necessarily having to have all these little kind of pull-out flaps on the side. But Sony have assured us that these flaps will last the lifetime of the phone, and they've been rigorously tested, taking them in, out. So hopefully that shouldn't be a problem in terms of long-term wear. Now also some differences in the design. The Xperia Z has got this extremely nicely machined power button on the side, and when you want to turn it on and off, it's just in the perfect position for either your finger or your thumb, depending on what hand you hold it in, and it's extremely nice and prominent, and also not too sensitive when you have it in your pocket. The HTC One, as an alternative to that, has actually got the power button on the top of the phone, and I'm not a fan of that because you have to kind of stretch around and use your finger or do something strange with your thumb to actually turn it on. But still a reasonable power button, although not as nicely machined as the one on the Xperia Z. Now if we switch that round and talk about the volume rocker on the Xperia Z feels a little bit more tacky than the power button, in fact a lot more tacky in comparison to its own power button. And if you compare that to the HTC One, the volume rocker is actually a nicely machined kind of rocker, and it definitely works and feels a lot more high-end than the one on the Xperia Z. Both of these phones come in two colours. The Xperia Z you can either get in this beautiful pearlescent white, or you can actually get it in a kind of piano black. Both of them look absolutely fantastic. And the HTC One you can either get in this kind of native aluminium colour, or you can actually get this in a nice kind of anodized black as well. Again, both of the colours look extremely nice. So in terms of design and build quality, to just wrap that little section up, both of them fantastic build quality, but just in slightly different ways. Both got their pros and cons by the way that they're actually designed, and it's really kind of an individual choice as to which one you prefer. A lot of people prefer the plastic phones over the metal ones, but then again, some people prefer the kind of premium feel that you get with that aluminium chassis. Now, onto the actual hardware specifications. Both of these phones have got a whopping 2 GB of RAM. Both of them have got quad-core processors. The actual Sony Xperia Z processor is clocked at 1.5 GHz. The one on the HTC One is clocked at 1.7 GHz, and the benchmark results definitely do kind of fulfill the output of those specific specifications, because the HTC One on Geekbench gets about 2,700, whilst the Xperia Z comes in at about 2,000. Now, those Geekbench results are one thing, and you can run them for as many benchmarks as you want, but the overall performance of these phones is pretty much a muchness in the fact that they're both exactly the same. The HTC One does feel just a little bit quicker just navigating around and doing certain things, but I think that's the slightly higher clock speed of the processor. But then the Xperia Z, because it doesn't have the HTC Sense overlay on top of the Android operating system, also feels equally snappy when doing certain other things, when navigating the native operating system, for example. Both of them have got the Adreno 320 GPU, which performs absolutely incredibly. I've tested both games and all kinds of applications on these, and they literally chew up pretty much anything that you have to throw at them. So pretty much the same there on the GPU side. A nice little touch as well, both of these smartphones have FM radio with RDS capability, which for me is a nice touch. You know, you can tune into some FM radio if you don't maybe have internet connectivity or something like that. And also, they're both LTE capable out of the box, so these both support the same kind of LTE standards. Now, one little advantage that the HTC One has over the Xperia Z is it actually supports the new Wi-Fi AC standard, meaning that if in the future you decide to go out and buy one of those AC access points, the HTC One is going to be able to connect up to that at the higher speeds and potentially get a higher throughput. So a nice touch there from HTC One to include those latest standards. Now, also in terms of hardware, obviously they've both got external speakers. Now, we know that with the HTC One, with these top and bottom speakers, and also the Beats inbuilt kind of functionality, these boom sound speakers absolutely destroy any other smartphone speakers on the market today. It really isn't any kind of just marketing bump or anything like that. They perform incredibly well. I've been absolutely amazed with the quality of these front facing speakers, and quite why everyone doesn't put them on the front, I really don't know. As an opposition to that, on the Sony Xperia Z, one of the things that really does let it down is the external speaker. It is absolutely awful on the Xperia Z. Absolutely terrible. It's probably because of the waterproofing that they've had to put on it to cover it up, and it's also in a ridiculous position whereby your native kind of hand holding position literally completely smothers the speaker, and it just sounds tinny and absolutely awful. Real good props out there to HTC, who have just brought out this incredible boom sound system on this phone. It makes a huge difference and really does kind of make you want to listen to music and movies and stuff like that without plugging in a set of headphones. Both of these phones support NFC as well, natively out of the box. And another slight difference between the two phones, or in fact not much of a difference, is the HTC has got a 2300 mAh battery, the Xperia Z has got a 2330 mAh battery. So although a difference, pretty much the same in terms of the actual power output by the battery. Battery life, I forgot to mention, is pretty much identical between both of these phones. They both have battery saving technologies built into them. The one on the Sony is a little bit more configurable and probably a little bit better, but then the battery life overall on the HTC One seems to be just slightly better. So when you marry the two up, the battery life is pretty much exactly the same. A slight fundamental difference in terms of the design of these phones. On the front of the HTC One, we have got two physical buttons on the front. So that is a back button and also a home button. The home button doubles up for the task manager. On the Sony Xperia Z, they've actually opted for 3 on-screen buttons. Now, the on-screen buttons do take about 1 centimetre all the way along at the bottom of the screen. So that 5-inch screen actually becomes that little bit smaller when you have actually got those buttons in display on that screen. So a little bit of a difference there in terms of the hardware differences. Now let's move on to the camera. The Xperia Z has got a whopping 13 megapixel rear facing camera. It's also got a 2.2 megapixel front facing camera. Both of those capable of recording full 1080p at 30 frames per second. And nicely as well, Sony have actually brought in to the features of the camera the ability to do HDR video, which is a very, very nice feature. Also, all of the auto settings that you've got in the Sony camera on the Xperia Z work extremely well. I have found that the pictures and the video that come out of the Xperia Z though to be just ever so soft in terms of the quality. They really could do with sharpening up quite a bit. Now the HTC One, in comparison to that, has got a very small 4 megapixel sensor, but it actually uses this ultra pixel technology which lets more light in, meaning that the video and the photos can actually take better quality under lower lighting conditions, which is typically what most of us have unless we're out in the middle of the day. Now I found the photo and the video quality on the HTC One to be very, very good in not low light situations, but lower than kind of full light situations, your typical sort of daytime lighting and indoor lighting, and produces extremely good video and photos in that scenario. It's also full 1080p on the front and the rear facing camera of the HTC One, again up to 30 frames per second. One thing I really liked about the HTC One is the audio quality of the microphone itself. The microphone is phenomenal on the HTC One for both making phone calls and also for recording video. The actual audio quality that comes out is not that far off something like this that I've got here, which is a full kind of semi-professional wireless system. I've been absolutely thrilled with the audio quality on the HTC One in terms of recording movies and phone calls. Also, that front facing camera on the HTC One has got an extremely wide angle lens, so you don't have to hold it at a ridiculous arm's length away from you in order to be able to get your face in the screen. So I think that was a really nice touch, and I've not really seen anyone do that on a front facing camera before. Now in terms of software, both of these run 4.1.2 Jelly Bean. Hopefully we will get an update to 4.2.2 at some stage in the future. Not quite sure who will get it first. Neither of them are particularly renowned for getting these updates out quickly, but at the moment they're both exactly the same, like I say, 4.1.2 Jelly Bean. Now with the HTC, they've got HTC Sense over the top of that, and they've also included this new kind of home screen called Blink Feed, which is a bit like a sort of graphical newsreader for all of your social networks and potentially some websites as well, probably using the RSS feed. Personally, I'm not that into it, and I've kind of set it to one side and made my normal home screen be my standard home screen, but I'm sure some people will like it, and it's nice that they've put some effort into kind of bringing something new. Sense seems to have been cut down quite considerably, not as much bloatware in there, and it actually navigates and works extremely quickly. Definitely some big advantages and improvements over that we had on the HTC One X and the One X Plus. The Sony, on the other hand, is really pretty much a native experience. They have added in certain features, but most of those I found to be pretty good ones. Actually, the wrapper that they've put on it actually works very, very well and really doesn't have hardly any bulk to the phone itself, and Sony really haven't put any kind of crappy applications on here or any kind of bloatware at all. So both extremely good in terms of the software. One thing I love about the HTC One is the fact that it's got the IR blaster, and they've put some TV software on here that not only enables you to control pretty much any TV that you can find on the market today, but also the hi-fi system along with the cable set top box as well. And built into that, they've built a whole bunch of TV guides and schedules as well. So that's a fantastic extra little application and piece of hardware that they've put in there. And the IR blaster is in fact doubled up with the power button, and I found it works really well. I've tested it on a Samsung TV, a Sharp TV, and also an LG TV, along with our native kind of Sky set-top box for satellite as well, and they all work perfectly well, along with that TV guide that picks up all of the latest TV shows and guides from your native country, and it seems to work absolutely incredibly. So a nice little feature there on the HTC One. Now, the screens. The Sony Xperia Z is a TFT screen, and it actually is a 5-inch screen, although like I say, that bar along the bottom there really does kind of reduce the size of it somewhat. On the other hand, we've got the HTC One, which is actually a Super LCD 3 display, and that's a 4.7 inch screen. And I think really that kind of size is the best sort of size for most smartphones. As soon as you start going above that, it becomes a little bit more difficult to kind of stretch around, unless you go for something like the Note 2, where you've kind of accepted that you're going to be using two hands. Now, in terms of the actual screen quality, the HTC One really does far outperform that of the Xperia Z. Now, when you look directly onto the screen of the Xperia Z, the contrast ratio and the vividity of everything is actually very good, although it could be slightly better. But as soon as you adjust the angle just even very slightly, and I'm not actually talking about looking at it from here or over here, I mean I'm literally talking just a few degrees, the contrast just completely goes, and it literally just washes out all of the colour and all of the vividity of the screen. The HTC One, on the other hand, is just incredible. Vivid colours right the way through, fantastic viewing angles, amazing contrast and good brightness as well. Now, I don't really hold much to this kind of viewing angle thing. I find when you're looking at your phone, you are generally looking at it. So I'm not kind of overwhelmed with that being a massive downside on the Xperia Z, but it's still a negative that has to be mentioned in this comparison video, and I think they could have done a lot better job with it. I've got to say though, when you are looking at it front on, it's pretty much as good as most screens that are out there today. Could have done with a little bit more contrast, but other than that, perfect colours, really, really nice colours, very nice blacks, very nice whites. I think it's a fantastic screen. It's just like I say, that viewing angle does put you off just a little bit. Now, the Xperia Z comes in at 441 ppi, which is absolutely incredible, but the HTC One just edges it again with 469 ppi, which is absolutely incredible. And viewing text and images and videos and everything on both of these phones is an absolute pleasure. I have to say, on the Xperia Z, because it's just that little bit bigger, when you go to really busy websites that have got tiny little text on it, it is just very slightly easier to read on the Xperia Z, just because it's got that little bit extra in terms of size. Anyway, so that's pretty much all the details of both of these phones. Like I said at the beginning, both of these phones are absolutely exceptional smartphones, and if you go out and buy any one of these, you're going to be extremely happy with either one of them that you buy. The differences between the two are actually not a huge amount. You know, there's this here and this there, but what one would I buy? Me personally, I've got to say the HTC One just very slightly edges it. I'm just totally in love with the build quality of this phone. Now, the Xperia Z, like I've said, still fantastic build quality. Pretty much everything about it is perfect. But for me, I just have to give it to the HTC One. Now, when it comes to your decision, you've really got to make the decisions about the differences between the two phones. Do you prefer the plastic waterproof casing on the Sony Xperia Z, or do you prefer the kind of premium feel of that aluminium casing on the HTC One? Do you prefer the more native experience of the Xperia Z in terms of the operating system, or do you prefer the tweaks that HTC have made by overwrapping that Android operating system with HTC Sense? Do you like the output of that ultra pixel camera, or do you prefer the huge 13 megapixel camera on the Xperia Z? Anyway guys, there you go. That's my in-depth detailed comparison between these two phones. Like I said, and it's very important to remember, these phones are incredible. If we'd have had these just a couple of years ago, it would have been out of this world. So whatever one you choose, you're going to be overwhelmed with. They're both absolutely incredible. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching. Please do hit that like button for me. It really helps me out, and I will see you all in the next video. See ya.